Hello, I'm Professor Keith Brown, and it's my delight to be an ambassador for a wonderful organisation, Faith in Later Life. Faith in Later Life is an organisation that wants to promote and encourage churches to think about how we work with and care for and indeed value older people. And I want to start off with that thought. How do we value older people? In our society, often, when you're retired, when you no longer got work, you perceive to have less value. And yet, I think we know as Christians that God values us all. God cares for us all. And I think in particular, he has a special heart, a special place for older people. I certainly do. Why? Well, because it was older people that helped me come to faith. I want to tell you about a gentleman called Claude. Claude was a man who'd grown up in the early part of the 1900s. He'd been an RAF pilot in the Second World War, a Spitfire pilot no less, and in fact on his desk he had a silver cigarette box, not very PC these days, is it? But it was a silver cigarette box with a silver Spitfire on the top of it, and I used to love it. I used to love it because I used to go around to Claude's office and he would, in modern day terms, we'd use the phrase, he would coach me. He just basically spent time with me. I had to go to his home, into his office, because his wife, Isabel, was severely disabled and he was a carer for his wife. He found it very hard to get out of the house. And so he used to invite people round, and one of the jobs that he did is he organised the Bible reading notes. And in my youth group, I used to be involved with handing those out to young people in my youth group, and I used to go to visit Claude to collect them. But he didn't just give me the notes. He spent time talking to me, listening to me. He valued me, and I valued him. An elderly person made a huge difference to my life. In my teenage years, he helped shape my thinking. He helped shape the way I saw the world. And indeed, in many ways, he helped shape my career. I've been very clear since being a young man that my calling as a Christian has been to work with the marginalised and the poor in society. And that's something I've done all of my life. And even though I've notionally retired recently, or a few years ago, I'm still involved in a whole range of activities as a government advisor, as the chair of the National Health Service Safeguarding Adults National Network, as a leader in fraud prevention, as a member of a church, as a member of a community, in speaking up for, writing about, and challenging the way we care for marginalised groups. And some of the most marginalised, the people that we don't hear much about, are lonely older people or older people. And I want to challenge us all in church to remember that the older generation we owe so much to. This is a generation that took us through the Second World War, that helped build the foundations of our faith, of our churches. The generation that taught us and supported us and helped us and inspired people like me. We need to be very careful that we continue to value and respect and hear from these people. And so as churches, I think one of the things we need to start to do much more is find ways to engage with and listen to the voices of our more older and more senior citizens. They have a wealth of experience. They can share their experience with the younger generations. So how might we have better intergenerational work? How might we encourage the older members of our congregation to share their life's experience, to share their life's work, to share their faith with younger members in our congregations. We need to value, we need to respect. We also need perhaps to consider how we resource this field. Many churches for the last few decades have been very concerned about declining numbers. Indeed, many churches have closed in the last few decades, and many are struggling with numbers, with members. And the pandemic, for many, was another watershed moment. I'd like us just to pause for a moment and consider how much resource the church has put into having young people and families. Most churches seem to want a youth worker or a families worker or a young adults worker to try and bring in these people. Very few churches appear to have ministry to older persons workers, even though, ironically enough, many of their congregation are older people. This is a generation that we owe so much to, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so proud to be an ambassador for Faith in Later Life. And I guess if you're watching this video, you have a soft spot too for older people and the older generation in your church and in your community. And I'd like to thank you for that. But I'd also like to urge you to do even more. To go out there and to say, we as church can make a real difference. We as church can actually inspire that generation to come together again. Many of these people used to come to church in the past. Many of these people understand the story of Jesus, understand that Jesus died on a cross, and have just, for some reason, lost or forgotten their faith, or forgotten about their faith. They're a generation that I believe we can minister to, we can witness to, and we can evangelize with and for, probably more profoundly than we can the younger generations in our society. I'd love to see churches have massive growth, not just with younger people and adults, but massive growth with older people. This has happened, ironically enough, in my own church in Southampton. We used to have a small group in our church that met every few weeks of older people. But it was really quite a closed group. You had to be a member of the group to go to the group, and they really were not very good at opening their arms or their minds or their hearts to other people. It was a coffee group and a luncheon club. We eventually closed that group down, in part because many of those members had become so old themselves, so elderly themselves, they couldn't attend any further or literally had passed away. And we sat down and we considered how we could better minister to older people in our community. And so we relaunched a ministry to older people. And what was fascinating is that this became very quickly the fastest growing part of our church. Not just 5 or 10 or 20 or 30, but 50, 60, 70, 80 older people started coming to our meetings. We had some of the most natural evangelists I've ever seen or witnessed in my life. People who were just talking to people at bus stops and saying where they were going, saying they were going for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee to our church, and bringing people from a bus stop that were going somewhere else just along to our church because they were inspired. They were thinking, oh, I might make some friends, somebody to have company with. And now, every other month, we have a list of activities that come out. A big list of activities. We have people that do craft, we have people that go on walks, we have people that play badminton, we have people that go to a local garden centre for tea. They're a community. They're a community of older people that's growing. They're a community that feel valued. They're a community that feel welcomed within our church. I'd like to inspire you to think about how you might bring in a generation of older people from your local community. How you might take the love of Jesus to those people towards the end of their lives. Thank you for listening to this. And I hope you find this and the other talks that I'm giving in this series inspirational. Inspirational because you hear the still small voice of God reminding you that every human being matters. Even the most elderly person, even the elderly person who's sick and infirmed and towards the end of their life, God still has compassion. Jesus still cares. And we need to be his hands and his feet, ministering to, caring for, and supporting people who've given their lives in service, who have been of value, who are of value to God and to you and to me. Thank you.